So there's a bit of an elephant in the Formula 1 room at the moment, and that is that Lewis Hamilton has still not signed for Mercedes and is now technically a free agent in 2021. Contract negotiations are still ongoing between the team and driver, and it's largely expected that an agreement will be made. But does Mercedes have a stronger hand in the negotiations? Does the team need the 7-time world champion? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. To work out whether Mercedes needs Lewis Hamilton, we obviously need to have a look back over what Lewis has offered the team over his 8 seasons with them. And from a first look, you can see that he's taken home 6 Drivers' World Championships and also contributed to 7 Constructors' Championships. Now these numbers are just staggering, but for at least 7 of the 8 seasons, you could argue that the Mercedes car was certainly one of, if not the strongest car on the grid. So there's certainly more to it than just the numbers. Times Lewis has proved his worth. For me, the first notable event that proved Hamilton's worth for Mercedes came way back in 2013. Following his shock move to the team from McLaren after the 2012 season, the Mercedes team at the time were far from the dominant force that they are today. In a difficult car that was harsh on its tyres, both Hamilton and Rosberg managed to outperform its true ability. It was in Hungary though that Hamilton was able to take pole position and the win for Mercedes. It was the team's 3rd victory of the season, but it came just before the summer break. Now this was critical as it worried the Red Bull team into continuing to develop their 2013 car, despite the new 2014 regulations being on the horizon. And it meant that while Mercedes fell off in comparison to the other teams, the Red Bull car was in a league of its own, with Sebastian Vettel winning every race in the second half of the year. That's 9 Grand Prix in a row, an impressive feat by anyone's standards. But it was quite clear that the Red Bull team had been focusing on their 2013 car throughout the whole season. Meanwhile, the Mercedes team fell off, but still managed to hang on for 2nd in the Constructors' Championship. But behind the scenes, the Mercedes team had stopped the development of their 2013 Challenger and set their sights on the new 2014 regulations. This focus meant that the team were dominant in the 2014 season. So this performance was Hamilton proving his value at an early stage in his Mercedes career, as he managed to deliver enough to put the pressure on their competitors during the 2013 season. However, you could also argue that this was a team effort, given Nico Rosberg had also contributed to this pressure after winning 2 races during the early part of the season. Now I'm not going to look at 2014, 15 or 16 in much depth for this video, purely because the Mercedes team was so dominant, winning the Constructors' Championship comfortably each time, and taking a 1-2 in the drivers' standings. Realistically, most drivers that a team like Mercedes would have bought in for that season could have done well in that car, so I would argue that the team didn't need Lewis Hamilton for those seasons. So we then find ourselves in 2017, when the Mercedes team last made a change to their driver lineup. The year was not quite so comfortable for the Mercedes team out at the front, as their main rivals Ferrari came back at them in the Constructors' Championship, and Sebastian Vettel also managed to split the 2 Mercedes drivers in the Drivers' Championship. For the first time in the turbo hybrid era, the Mercedes team were not untouchable across the season. The team didn't achieve the 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, with Vettel finishing 2nd, as he took 5 wins across that 20-race season, and he ended up 46 points behind Hamilton, but had found a chink in the armour of the Mercedes team. So, on this occasion, the value of having Lewis Hamilton in the team was obvious to see. It isn't clear what would or could have happened if the British driver wasn't at the team, or if Mercedes had a different driver in that seat that perhaps didn't have the talent of Lewis Hamilton. But what we know for sure is that the competition was there, and it was Lewis that provided the consistent performances across the whole season that won him the championship. If there was any particular year that really stood out through the Mercedes dominant era, it would be 2018. This was a year that Lewis won the championship without, arguably, having the fastest car on the grid. You just have to look at Valtteri Bottas' season to see this, as the Finn finished in 5th position with no race victories to his name. It has to be said that the Mercedes team had that winning mentality and momentum that would certainly support them in a season like the 2018 one, but Lewis Hamilton did have that extra 1 or 2% that enabled the team to take both championships once again. So on this occasion, for the 2nd season in a row, although more so in 2018, Lewis Hamilton had made the difference to allow the team to take both championships again. 2019 and 20 were both seasons once again where Mercedes' dominance was clear, as what was a growing threat from Ferrari subsided somewhat. So here again, you can assume that most drivers that would have been in that Mercedes seat would have probably allowed them to take both championships. So, over his 7 years with the team, there have undoubtedly been times where Lewis Hamilton has proved the difference to take the team to both championships, and his performances have taken the team to that next level. The ability of the driver to maintain those top level performances over such a prolonged period of time is also impressive. He's definitely improved as a driver and grown with his time at Mercedes, and I'd say that he's pretty untouchable right now, given the other teams haven't got the opportunity to threaten the Mercedes car. But what about 2021? Before I get into looking at the 2021 season, I just wanted to quickly ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive and leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it. I've loads more F1 content to come for the 2021 season and beyond. Thanks. But what about 2021, I hear you ask? Well, I think there are 3 key areas to look at: the 2021 regulations, the threat of George Russell, and the contract negotiations themselves. The first point to consider is how different the 2021 regulations are to 2020, but really there aren't that many differences. The FIA are reducing the downforce available by shrinking the size of the floor, the engine regulations are obviously stable, and the Mercedes dual axis steering or DAS system has been banned for the coming season. All of the changes are relatively minor, and that realistically means that we're in for another Mercedes dominant season. To add to this, it can be assumed that most teams won't be focused on their 2021 development anyway, and we can expect minor evolutions of the 2020 cars for this coming season. There are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, in an effort to save the teams money in these unprecedented times, the FIA has put a limit on the number of significant changes a team can make using a token system. And number two, the 2022 regulations are on the horizon, and the FIA has confirmed that they do not have plans to further delay these changes. So all of the teams will have a focus on these regulations with the sight to challenge the Mercedes dominance. So I suppose the answer to whether Mercedes need Lewis Hamilton for 2021 is probably not. But is that the whole story? Given it's so unclear as to which team will be the best in 2022, it could be anyone's guess as to whether the team will need their star driver in Lewis Hamilton to challenge for the title. What about George Russell? The main point that I'm yet to address in this video is of course George Russell. The substitute driver came in at the Sakir Grand Prix and well and truly proved his worth in his cameo appearance for the team. Across the weekend, he qualified just 0.02 of a second behind Bottas and did enough to take second place on the grid. He overtook Bottas at the start of the race and then looked comfortable out at the front until the team let him down in the pit stops. Even after Russell fell back, he impressively got past a number of drivers, including Bottas, before a puncher dropped him to the back of the pack. Now this performance showed the true potential of George, as for the first time in his Formula 1 career, he had the opportunity to drive a car that could fight at the front of the grid. And he did a great job, proving that he could deliver for the team when called upon. But we have to consider the fact that the performance came during a year in which the Mercedes team were utterly dominant once again. Hamilton obviously won the championship after just 14 rounds of the 17-round season. So had this opportunity have come for George in 2018, for example, where the competition between Mercedes and Ferrari was a lot closer, would he have been able to jump in and race at the front? Now I'm not doubting Russell's ability. He's an unbelievable driver and definitely deserves to be driving for a top team. And he's also just 22 years old at the moment, so he will absolutely improve over time and is a potential Formula 1 future world champion. But can the team trust him as much as Lewis? Of course not. He simply hasn't got the experience for the team to have that kind of trust in him. Contract negotiations. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of the contract negotiation rumours. There are enough videos out there covering that, but I would say that there are 4 key points to note. Number 1, it seems like the Mercedes team are viewing Russell's performance as an opportunity to put pressure on Hamilton's high salary expectation. Given Russell is already under contract with the team, he would likely be very cheap to bring in, and there would just need to be a payoff to Williams to buy him out of his contract. Number 2, it makes sense that given the two parties have a different view of salary expectations, that the negotiations are going to string out for a while. Given the start of the season has already been pushed out, they have even more time to get an agreement in place. Number 3, given the driver salary cap of $30 million is due to arrive in 2023, I'm sure the team will be keen to ensure the driver's salary does not blow their restricted budget in the future, so they need to ensure that the team is prepared for those coming seasons. And my 4th and final point to note on the contract negotiations is that supposedly Lewis is trying to have more control over his teammate. Obviously, Lewis enjoys having Bottas as a teammate, as the latter cannot beat him over the course of a full season. He's also had run-ins with tough teammates in the past, thinking back to Fernando Alonso at McLaren and Nico Rosberg at Mercedes. So perhaps he sees the threat in having the young gun George Russell up against him in the same machinery is a bit too much. But for me, the team need to ensure they keep Russell under contract, and realistically any more time in that Williams car beyond 2021, and George will likely be taken by another team. So, will Lewis Hamilton sign for Mercedes? I still remain very confident that he will sign for the team. He's been completing his off-season training in preparation for the season, so I don't expect we'll see the driver taking a year out of the sport. But does Mercedes need the driver? For me, I don't think they do for 2021, but they absolutely need him for 2022, just in case the regulation changes tighten up the field. And that is why I think they need to ensure they get his signature in time for the 2021 season. It makes sense for both parties, so I think it's just a matter of time. So that's my view on whether Mercedes need to sign Lewis Hamilton for 2021. What's yours? Let me know in the comments, and if you've watched this video this far, then please leave it a like and consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. I've got loads more videos to come for the 2021 season and beyond.